So, oil pulling. It sounds like one of these ancient remedies, the kind that shows up on wellness blogs right next to turmeric lattes or cold plunges. But here's what's interesting, it's not entirely nonsense. Some people swear it cured their bad breath, improved their gums, and even helped with brain fog. So, is there any science behind it, or is it just another feel good ritual with no real benefit? Let's break it down. Just what's actually happening in your mouth when you swish the oil and whether it's worth doing. And by the way, I'm Jimmy, I'm a dentist, and I make these videos to help you understand your oral health and what actually works. Okay, so first things first, this isn't some TikTok trend. Oil pulling goes back to like over 1,000 years back to ancient India. And here's what's interesting. They weren't using coconut oil, they were using sesame oil, and they weren't doing it for fresh breath or whiter teeth. They literally thought it would pull out toxins from their body through their mouth. Now, if we sketch this over here, let's say this is the mouth. As you can tell, I'm not very good at sketching. And then the oil goes in. So they would swish with the oil. And what they believed is that it would pull out the toxins that travel to the heart, that travel to the brain, and travel to the joints. And now, before you roll your eyes on ancient medicine, here's something fascinating. So, with all the research that we know nowadays about oral bacteria and dentistry, is that uh, these bacteria can travel through your bloodstream to the heart, to the brain, and to the joints. But I'll get to that in a minute. So, the original Ayurvedic texts described oil pulling as kavala or gandusha, and they basically believed that different oils had different properties. So, sesame for detox, coconut for antimicrobial effects, and sunflower for inflammation, which raises an interesting question. Does the type of oil actually matter? Because people nowadays grab whatever's in their pantry. And if we fast forward to today, and the claims have evolved, I hear people say that it whitens their teeth, it cures bad breath, it prevents cavities, and it heals gums. And somehow, I love this one, is that it clears up brain fog. And whenever we look at something that claims to fix everything, it usually fixes nothing. And what I wanted to know is that, is there anything real happening here? Or is it just an expensive mouthwash? So let's understand what's happening here. When you put oil in your mouth and start swishing, the first thing it mixes with is saliva. And this creates a foamy emulsified mixture. So imagine this. Let's say this is your tooth. So I'm going to try and draw this in yellow. And that's the tooth. And whenever you eat or drink something, a layer of biofilm forms, which I've labeled in white. And that is the biofilm. Uh, and inside the biofilm, there's microscopic cities of which I'm labeling in green. And this is bacteria. And these bacteria basically live together, and it's not just like a city that's sitting there. So what it's doing is it's constantly pumping out acids, it's pumping out toxins, and it's also pumping out inflammatory chemicals. And that's happening 24/7, even when your mouth feels clean. Now, most of this biofilm isn't water soluble. So when you rinse your mouth with water or even mouthwash, you're not really disturbing it much. It's like trying to clean grease with just water. But the oil can actually bind onto some of these fat soluble particles in the biofilm. And here's the part that surprised me. Many of these harmful bacterial toxins are lipophilic, meaning they dissolve in fat but not water. So theoretically, oil might grab onto these toxins that regular mouthwash leaves behind. So as you swish for 10, 15, 20 minutes, you're potentially lifting away the loose bacteria and softening up the plaque, especially around your tongue, your gums, your cheeks. And I wouldn't think of it as a deep clean, but more of like using a gentle cloth, wiping down the surface that usually gets splashed with water. And here's another thing also about the mechanism uh, that no one really talks about. And the mechanical action of swishing for 15 to 20 minutes which is basically exercising your jaw muscles, what it also does is it stimulates your natural saliva production. Your saliva is like your mouth's natural defense system. That is very important because a lot of people, and especially in the morning, they don't produce enough saliva. And I'll explain why that matters in just a moment. So I started looking into the studies on oil pulling, and honestly, there aren't many. And most of them came out of India, which makes sense since this is where oil pulling originated from. But the sample sizes were tiny. We're talking 20 or 30 people and mostly lasted a week or two. Still, now here's what they found. When people did oil pulling every day for about 15 to 20 minutes, a few things happened. First thing is there was a reduction in Streptococcus um, mutans, which is basically the main bacteria that's linked to cavities. The other thing is there was a reduction in plaque scores. So these went down slightly. And the other thing is their gums also got less inflamed. Uh, but keep in mind, uh, it's about as much as you'd get from rinsing with normal salt water. And interestingly, it didn't matter which type of oil people used, coconut, sesame, sunflower, the results were about the same. But here's where it gets murky. So none of these studies compared oil pulling to regular flossing or to people who had a solid oral hygiene routine. And none of them followed the participants for a long enough period to see if the benefits actually lasted. And one study did catch my attention. It showed a slight reduction in volatile sulfur compounds, and these are molecules that are responsible for bad breath. And oil pulling worked just as well as chlorhexidine mouthwash, though without the long-term research and clinical validation. So yes, it may help a little, but a little is a key phrase here. Now, why do so many people swear by oil pulling like it completely changed their oral health? And I think it's because when people start to oil pull, they usually do it as part of a bigger shift. And what I mean here is, let's try and illustrate it. When somebody starts to oil pull, what happens is they start to brush better because they start to brush more carefully. So they brush better. And please excuse my handwriting. And then they floss more, they drink more water, and they cut back on sugar. So what this means is healthier habits. Um, And when their breath improves and their gums stop bleeding, what they do is they credit the oil. And the truth is, it's probably all just working together in a synergy. And that's the real power here. So oil pulling might help a bit, but the real magic is in the routine it creates. And it's basically like a spark that gets everything moving. And this basically relates to something called the first success principle. So when people start seeing small improvements from oil pulling, what they do is they get motivated to take better care of their mouth overall, and it's like a gateway habit. But first, let's talk about the signs that no one mentions. And these are the downsides. So first, if you're doing it wrong, you could actually be making things worse. Some people might swallow the oil by mistake instead of spitting it out. That's not detoxing, that's just consuming more calories and potentially reintroducing bacteria that you just pulled out. And the second thing is, I feel like 20 minutes is a long time. And you could spend that time flossing properly, which could have a much bigger impact on your oral health. And the third thing is some people get too focused into oil pulling that they skip brushing. And I've seen patients who thought oil pulling was enough. It's not. So, does the type of oil matter? Most people use coconut oil because it's trendy, it has natural antimicrobial properties from the lauric acid, but the research shows that sesame oil works just as well. So does sunflower oil, and even olive oil showed benefits in one small study. And the mechanisms seem to be more about the oil's ability to emulsify and bind to bacterial toxins and not the specific antimicrobial properties. And that being said, coconut oil has one advantage. It's solid at room temperature, so it's less messy to measure out and it tastes better than sesame oil. But here's what's really interesting. One study compared the different swishing times, and they found that 5 minutes gave about 60% of the benefit of 20 minutes. So if you're short on time, shorter sessions still do help. So here's the bottom line. Oil pulling, it's not a miracle, but it's not nonsense either. It may help a little, especially with soft tissue cleaning, but it's not a replacement for the basics. And definitely it's not a detox for your bloodstream. And what matters more is what's happening in your mouth when nothing seems wrong. Because some of the biggest issues I see, they usually don't come with pain. They usually come slowly, quietly. You might want to check out my video about hidden signs you don't want to miss. I'll see you there.